Hello, everyone. Welcome back to What Now, a podcast for the lost and found. I'm your host, Amanda. I am here with my buddy Dirks. I hope all of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope that all of you, if you were able to or chose to, had the opportunity to do so as well. I don't know how many listeners may or may not celebrate Thanksgiving, so we won't get into that, but I do hope that you had the opportunity to at least slow down, take time for yourself, and refill your own cup. And, you do deserve that opportunity, and I hope that you were able to have that. Dirks and I just got home from visiting with my family. We had a really great time, got to see my dad's parents and a little bit of my mom's side of the family and catch up with my brother and his fiance. So that was really lovely, and I'm very grateful that I do live a lot closer to all of them now. It makes these visits a bit more frequent than I used to have, and it just kind of makes my personal life easier. So I'm sure all of you guys can understand that whether or not you've got family close or family far, it definitely helps when you see them when you're able to. So I get that, but I hope everybody enjoyed their Thanksgiving. I'm just grateful to be here, and I hope that tonight's topic can resonate with you the way that it has with me. So as you may know from listening to previous episodes, when I'm doing a solo show, typically it's because it's a topic that I've either dealt with personally or I did research about it because I wanted to include it in my show, or it's possible that this is a topic that just kind of struck me during the week, and I dug into it a little bit more and wanted to share my thoughts with you about that particular topic. So tonight, or today, I guess, depending on when you're listening, this episode is all about self-loss. Now, you might be thinking, Amanda, self-loss, that sounds pretty dark or, obscure. What exactly is that? Well, we're going to dive into it. I was doing some research for this show, and I was trying to find either maybe therapy or professionals in psychology or relationships, something like that, or even organizational psychology, people that would work in business that help major businesses with building their business culture, something like that. Like maybe I could find some more educated people who might understand a bit more of what I had gone through in my career and why maybe I had struggled so much with transitioning out of the government and leaving that particular identity behind. And I ran across someone named Dr. Sarah Kubrick, Kubrick, Kubrick. She is an existential psychotherapist and the author of a book called It's on Me. And she came up a couple of times in my research for helping people with existential therapy and finding yourself, particularly people who have gone through an intense experience of self-loss. And it sounded interesting, and so I dove a little bit deeper into that. And today, I would like to share with you what I have found, what I thought was helpful from her research. And I would like to admit, first off, I don't know everything. I am not a psychotherapist. I'm not a clinical psychologist. As you know from previous episodes, I did not make it to my PhD in clinical psychology, so that is not a thing. But the more I dug into this particular doctor and her research and her practice, the more I resonated with what she was talking about, because it sounded like, that's me. That I didn't go through that same trauma that she did or that some of her patients did in her examples that she provides in her book, but the sensation and the identity concerns and the moments where you wake up and go, why did I do that? Or who was I? How could I have let myself get this far and not understand what exactly it is going on? Like, how was I so passive in my own life? So it's very interesting. So I would love to dive into that. I will provide links in the description of the show. So that way, if you would like to look at the research that I found or listen to some of her interviews, you are more than welcome to do so and dig through some of that too, in case any of this resonates with you. And as always, if any of you are listening to the show and you know of another individual who might be a subject matter expert on this particular topic or any of the other topics we've brought up so far, please reach out to me at askwhatnowpodcast@gmail.com. Send me a message. Let me know who you think might also be helpful, or if there's another person you believe I should reach out to bring on as a guest on the show. I'd be happy to do that. And I'm also open to my own education. If this is something you've also gone through and it resonates with you, I would love to hear your story and help each other. That's the whole point of the show, to help everyone recognize that they are not alone, no matter what it is that they might be going through at the time. All right, let's dive on in. So, in my research about Dr. Kubrick, she is an existential psychotherapist. So, she is a trauma-informed clinician, and she has a doctorate in psychotherapy science, and she happens to specialize in moral trauma, identity, existential crisis, and relationship issues. So let's see if I can explain this correctly. As an existential psychotherapist, this means that how she conceptualizes and understands human suffering, change, growth is all rooted in the tenets of existential philosophy. So according to her website, she focuses on concepts that are universally acceptable to the human existence. So anything that could apply to humans related to responsibility, freedom, choice, death, authenticity, and meaning. So her work often entails helping people figure out who they are, why they are here, how they can show up in a world as a free, authentic, and meaningful individual. So helping you find a way to be your most authentic self. And in the research that I found, she often brings up in her interviews that the very first thing that she has her patients do is try and understand what is the self. If you don't really understand who you are, you're not going to be able to live in an authentic way, right? You're going to be guessing and acting like someone else, and it may impede you from living your best life. So you first have to understand what is the self. And so based on her definition, the self is a combination of responsibility, choice, and freedom. Your self is how you act, because you cannot actually differentiate the way that you show up in the world with who you are. So this was kind of tough for me to understand at first when she was talking about it, but essentially she was saying that if we allow ourselves to continuously show up in an inauthentic way, then you eventually become lost and you are unable to align your wants, your needs, and your actions with your true self. So you might think that your existential crisis is like triggered by a traumatic event or in a very obvious, decisive moment in your life. And that's how you start to lose yourself, right? But according to Dr. Sarah, that's not actually the case. More often than not, it's tiny actions built up over time where you are continuously showing up in ways that don't align with who you really are. And that's how you can accidentally get to that place of self-loss, where you can accidentally become someone that you don't even recognize, because it might be initiated from a traumatic event or an ordeal that you weren't expecting, but the continued participation in that action is what causes you to probably eventually hit that existential crisis where you don't really know what's going on. So for Dr. Sarah, she defines self-loss as your self-estrangement, your lack of congruency, or your failed responsibility to be yourself, right? And so what exactly would that look like? So based on the research that I found, I kind of wanted to deep dive into this because I never really thought of myself as not being true to myself. Like, you know, I would love to say that there's only one Amanda Powers in the world, but that's not true. I'm sure there's quite a handful, if not tens of us that actually have that name. And you're different in other ways, but like I always thought that I'm a pretty genuine person, or at least I show up as who I am. I don't necessarily think that at my core I've changed all that much, but I've grown through my own experience. But the idea that I failed to show up as myself, or I failed the responsibility of being myself, was a little shocking, you know. So typically, I guess I didn't really realize that maybe this was something I was actually going through at the time, because I wasn't actually asking these questions to myself either when I was struggling so much. So Dr. Sarah talks about how you can identify the self-loss if you're going through a period where you're asking yourself, who am I? And you're not able to answer the question, or you're doing certain actions and then not being able to recognize yourself in those actions. Even in that exact moment, you did it. And then you're like, wow, why did I choose to do that? Why did I say that? Why did I show up that way? Why did I agree to do this when you were completely unable to identify why you did those things? So that's what she defines self-loss as. So as I stated before, these things can show up in everyday life. It's actually mostly caused by our own actions. It's often unnoticed, but you are providing an active participation. So it's the buildup of those daily decisions of how you choose to show up every day. And the hardest part of understanding your self-loss is understanding the participation you had in it. Acknowledging that you were the one that was choosing, whether or not you understood in the moment or not, you were the one that was choosing to live inauthentically. And you became lost from making those tiny decisions repeated over time. And it's, according to her book, it's even the smallest things, like saying yes when you wanted to say no, saying no when you wanted to say yes, going out with your friends when you didn't actually feel like it, being in a relationship when you did not want to be anymore, having sex when you wanted to or not wanted, when you did not want to, or, you know, not doing it when you did actually want to, like contradicting what is authentic to you in that moment, or authentic to you as a person, over and over and over again. Staying in a job, or keeping your, you know, biting your tongue when you know that something's wrong is happening and you don't know, you know what the right thing to do is, but you decide not to do it anyway. Those little tiny things over and over again. If it can even be as simple as your nutrition. You know that you should be eating X, Y, and Z vegetables or a certain diet to get yourself back on track, or you know that pizza and junk food and tacos and 64-ounce sodas and whatever else are not the things you should be putting in your body, but you are actively choosing every day to not fuel yourself to the best of your ability. But your reality is that you do know that you should be doing those things, and you're just not. You're choosing not to. You're ignoring your ability to take care of yourself, to value and honor your body over and over and over again, your body or your mind or your emotions over and over and over again. So the key here is that if you're living inauthentically long enough, you're going to lose yourself. And it's not always intentional, right? Like, you don't often realize that you're even doing it is significant, is based on what I've learned so far. And when I first started reading some of her work and listening to some of her research and her interviews, it kind of got me upset. Like, what do you mean I didn't notice these things? What do you mean it's my fault? What do you mean that, like, I'm to blame here for this? Like, how could I not notice these things? I'm super observant. I was an intelligence analyst for 10 years. I see details. I follow these rules. I know what's right for me. Like, I'm alive, right? Like, I went through so many terrible, not awesome things in my life, not just during my career, but in existing alone as a woman in this country. And what are you saying to me that it's my fault? Right? So this was, kind of horrifying. And what really clicked for me was when I listened to one of her interviews. It was, I believe, with the Girls Gotta Eat podcast. She came on their show a couple weeks back, and she said something, again, I'm going to be paraphrasing that part of the interview, but she said that these realizations, that essentially meaning the realization where you are starting to realize that you are going through a period of self-loss, these realizations often happen after reaching a significant goal. You spend so much time pouring so much effort into getting this thing done, this goal done, this career milestone, this relationship milestone, this societal expectation that you've been told and you've been fed for years. You finally get it, you do it, you work hard for it, you do everything in your power to get to that point, and you spend so much time and pour so much effort into getting this thing done that you thought that you were supposed to do. But once it's over, it is horrifying to realize that you have no idea what to do, and you don't know why this thing that you went for, that you worked so hard for, is no longer fulfilling for you. And when I heard her say this in the interview, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I started to think back about what was I doing in my life leading up to my job in Philadelphia? What were the steps and the decisions? Where was my blind participation in my own self-loss? And I was thinking about that over the last week. I had worked so hard for a very, very, very long time to get to that level of experience and technique and access and pride, right? Of doing the job that I do still believe is an extremely important job. A very valuable agency. And I guess for whatever reason, I had hit that goal. But as soon as I got to that goal, I couldn't see past anything else. I couldn't grow anymore. I couldn't do what I wanted to do, which was, I wanted to do a good job at work. I wanted to be recognized for the contributions that I was making. I didn't need special awards or anything like that, but it would be nice to know that I was bringing something valuable to the table, or that at least the people I brought it to the table for valued what I was putting on the table. Oh God, I'm the worst with metaphors. I'm so sorry, you guys. But it wasn't happening, and I was no longer being fulfilled in my position, and it's so upsetting because there's so much work to be done there. There's so much work that you can do, and like their jobs are going to be never ending in the Bureau. And every day they're putting their lives on the line to help people that will never meet them, never know what they're doing. If they're doing their job right, you will never hear about some cases because they stopped them in their tracks before they got bad, you know? And it was horrifying. I don't remember the exact day that I quote unquote woke up and had the realization that something's bad. But I do remember a time period. I had just come back from a 90-day tour in DC. I did a temporary assignment to help with response to the January 6th Capitol siege investigations, to help with the Washington, D.C. field offices cases. They needed extra hands, and so I volunteered to help support those investigations. And I came back to Philadelphia after that was over. And I won't get into exacts, but it had been made clear to me that my skill set was still not going to be utilized to the best of its ability. I was still going to be overlooked for a certain position. And at the time, management really had no hurry to utilize me, despite all the work that I had done up to that point. So that is probably when I really started to wake up and feel so horrified that I could not understand, how did I get here? How did I get to this point? So how did I let myself get, I don't know if it was my hopes up, or how did I let myself get so disrespected professionally and personally over and over and over again, when I thought the entire time I was doing the right thing? But maybe it turns out I was actually being inauthentic to myself, because I was keeping a lot of my thoughts to myself. I was trying to keep my frustration and my sadness to myself, my disapproval or disagreement with how things were being handled in the field to myself, or at least only to people that I knew I could trust, who were close to me. But it turns out, according to Dr. Sarah, that was not the moment when the self-loss started. That was the peak, right? That was the moment that I woke up and realized I was no longer happy and did not like my life there anymore, and needed to find a way to figure out what to do about it, right? So it really struck me when she said that in the interview. You know, these realizations often happen after you reach a significant goal. And once it's over, it is horrifying for you to realize that you have no idea what to do. Especially for somebody like me, somebody that's always had a plan, who typically always knows what's going on, or who always has her, for lack of a better term, her shit together. It's a terrifying time. It really, really is. And sometimes you really just don't realize how bad things are until you remove yourself from the situation. So I think when I finally decided to move to Nashville, and I did physically do that and could get a good step away from it, right? You know, and at least a year away from that particular experience, I could finally breathe a little bit and get out of survival mode and grieve that particular identity. So I'm still learning a bit more about that, but it was helpful to listen to Dr. Sarah and hear more about what exactly self-loss is so I could understand what I went through and how self-loss manifests so I can know what to pay attention for in the future, but also to give my own self grace, that like this is still something I'm trying to understand. This is still something that I will be working through. But it gave me so much clarity this past week, being able to give a name to what it is that I've been feeling, right? Sometimes just identifying what the problem is can give so much relief, because then you can make a plan. Then you can research it. Then you can understand you can put in the work, the intentional work to address it, right? So I appreciate you being here and listening to me go down the rabbit hole of self-loss on this episode, but it was really helpful for me. So I want to keep sharing with you guys. So how exactly does self-loss manifest, Amanda? What did you learn? Well, thanks for asking. First things first, Dr. Kubrick says that you start to have a strange relationship with your emotions. You start to not be able to identify what your emotions are. You become easily overwhelmed by your emotions. You may not know how to communicate what it is that you're feeling or thinking. And it becomes very frustrating to have such a strange or estranged relationship with your emotions. Another way that it can manifest, self-loss can manifest, is by you're not listening to your body. You're not taking its messages seriously. You are trying to show up and operate every single day, but now you're having aches and pains. You're having headaches that you didn't have before, stomach pains. Your body is starting to feel dysfunctional. And the reality is that the body is probably trying to tell you something. You've been living in fight or flight mode too long. But for whatever reason, while you're dealing with your self-loss, you're not able to listen to it or hear it or understand it when your body is sending you messages like that. A third way that self-loss can sometimes manifest is in failed relationships. If you do not know who you are, then it's going to be difficult for you to select a partner that actually works for you, right? How are you supposed to find somebody that is a good match for you if you don't really understand what it is that you want either? Or who are you? What are your boundaries? What are your pros, your cons, your limitations and expectations of yourself, much less someone else, right? If you're going through a self-loss period and you're having a failed relationship, it might be because you've not been showing up as your authentic self. So your relationships continue to fail because your partner is in a relationship now with someone with a mask on, right? You're not actually being true to who you are. So your partner may have fallen in love with the person you put on every day, not your true self. And that could be really difficult and hard to manage. And it makes you think like, woe is me. Like, how come this is never working? And the truth is it can't work if your partner is falling in love with a projection or a hope of who you are, or the mask that she says you're putting on every day. It's difficult. Another way self-loss can manifest, she says, is through inner consent. Now, this is a concept I definitely still need to do some more research on, or I'm really excited to read about this more in her book. But inner consent, she describes, is mainly where you won't have the ability to give yourself permission or the agreement during moments in life to say, yes, this is correct. Yes, this is what I want. Or even allow yourself to have the feeling of, yes, this is right, because you won't know if that feeling or that experience actually aligns with your true self. You've never said yes or said no when you did or did not want to, right? Like you have to allow yourself a moment to actually process a feeling or an experience and decide, did I like that actually, or did I say I liked that to save face or to make somebody else happy rather than myself happy, I guess, is the way that I understood that definition. But definitely something to think about and for me to learn more about as I go along with this process on this podcast. But the final way she lists as how does self-loss manifest, the final way is through your meaning and morality. And that means you do not know what meaning aligns to your life. We won't know what's moral versus immoral. And when people violate their morality, then they violate their true sense of self. So if you're constantly going against, you're making decisions or committing actions that go against what you actually believe in, you are, I guess, metaphorically or apparently chipping away at yourself, one decision at a time, until you lose sight of who you really are. And that can also be a pretty scary feeling when you're not aligning your decisions with something that has meaning to you or aligns with your morals in general. And she says that self-loss can happen through a traumatic experience. Based on her background story, she was a survivor of 2 wars in Eastern Europe as a child and was able to immigrate, I believe, to Canada. I will definitely double check that. But she did not realize growing up that what she went through was truly traumatic at the time, right? So she says that in hindsight, when she had her horrific awakening experience, the moment she realized that she had no idea who she was living a life that she did not know, and she could not understand how she got there, was in her mid-20s. But her trauma from her childhood probably initiated the self-loss process because she had been living in survival mode for so long. She was making decisions. She was going to the schools, getting the grades, meeting the partner, getting married, doing the career, making all these moves and decisions based on what she thought she was supposed to be doing. And then one day realized that that's not what she wanted, actually. She was living a life that was not true to who she was. And so she had to do the work and start over. And she does not accredit her past with the wars as the cause of her self-loss, but rather passive experiences that she repeated over time. And that she committed so much to that one idea of herself that it actually became a slippery slope, which hit me again because as I've said in some of my earlier episodes, I was so devoted to being Amanda the analyst, Amanda the FBI employee, Amanda the national security student, but I was very, very committed to being that girl. I wanted to be that person. I wanted so badly to succeed in that world. And I think it became a really slippery slope, like what she talks about. I may have overcommitted to that one identity, and that's what I had. So letting go of it was painful. I had to shed a part of my old self to allow space for my new self to show up. So it's been interesting, the parallels that she talks about, even though she and I have had very, very different upbringings, very different lifestyles, very different cultural experiences, education levels, etc. It was stunning to me how much I could actually relate to her and what she was talking about and felt understood by somebody that I've never met before, right? It's crazy. But she does talk about that one thing that she would tell herself when, she woke up in her early 20s living a life that was not her own was that, you don't have to live in survival mode anymore. You are no longer under threat. You are allowed to take up space and think about your happiness rather than just survival. And I did not, when I heard her say that, I did not realize how long I had been doing that as well. How long, well before I ever moved to Philadelphia, how long I had been acting that way and not living in alignment for who I am and what I deserve and what I believe I should have in this life, right? So it was heavy. It was heavy to listen to some of her stuff. And she closed her interviews talking about that happiness question, right? There's a whole lot more we could dive into for self-loss, but these are just kind of the highlights of what I took away from her interviews so far and what I've learned about this process so far. But she would typically end a lot of her interviews with asking either the host or the interviewer, how often do we actually ask each other, are you happy? Think about it. Instead we say, did you reach your goal? When did you get married? When are you having kids? When are you buying a house? Or et cetera, et cetera. Our intentions and our interactions with each other and our questions to one another are so output oriented rather than individual fulfillment based, right? So instead of asking about your essence, of asking about how you are or how you're doing, are you happy? We ask you a question that's an immediate comparison, right? It's all about how much have you done yet? How much can you do for me yet? Do you have anything of value to put forward, to this conversation, etc.? And that's wild, right? Like, no wonder so many people feel lost. No wonder so many people run this rat race and then get to the cheese and go, this is it? What? How did this happen? How did I get to a place where I don't even recognize who I am? Like, it never made sense to me when people would say I'd look in the mirror and don't know what's looking back at me. And it's kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, it's your face. That's you. And it's kind of like, no, when that is real. Some people truly wake up and they have no idea who's looking back at them, or they don't like who's looking back at them. And you want to know why? It's because they've not been living an authentic life. They've not been doing what they need to do to choose happiness for themselves. So what the question should be, not did you reach your goal, but rather, am I doing everything I can to live a fulfilling life? She says that a happy life is not always possible because happiness is an emotion that can come and go. But are you actively taking steps or measures for yourself where you can answer this question with confidence? Am I doing everything I can to live a fulfilling life? So I I encourage you to ask yourself that question, and don't be afraid of the answer that comes out. It may not be an answer you like. It may be great. Maybe you are at your peak and you're just coasting on joy and you are having the time of your life. Like you are in your glow up, or whatever the kids say these days. But I think that that's such a crucial question. Not to say that having goals isn't important, and not to say that manifesting something for your future or a goal that you're trying to get to a place in your career, in your fitness, in your emotional journey, in your relationship, that setting goals is a bad thing. I don't think that's the case, and I don't think that that's what she's talking about, but rather not devaluing yourself or setting all of your value, I guess, rather, on whether or not you reach the goal. And then making sure that you check in on other people's goals too, right? Like for comparison purposes, did you reach your XYZ output? Whatever, insert word, insert question, your grandmother, your auntie, your uncle, your brother, your sister, anybody else that's asking you these things. Did you do that, rather than actually, am I doing everything I can to live a fulfilling life? And as far as I can tell, based on Sarah's research, if you can answer that question, that's how you know where to go from there. If the answer is yes, then great. You are most likely feeling fulfilled and intentional and able to choose happiness. It's easier for you to choose happiness every day because you are doing the most that you can to live a fulfilling life. If your answer is no, then that gives you a place to start. Honestly, it gives you an answer of like, okay, what would I need to do to live a fulfilling life? And maybe that's, maybe you do go to therapy. You get an objective person to help you with that guidance. You finally take that class you always wanted to take. You leave that relationship that makes you feel like garbage. You do something like me. You leave the industry that no longer provides you that same drive, that doesn't encourage you to be your best self. If you're in a place where you're I guess, feeling stagnant or less than, figure it out. You got this. You can always spend the time and push yourself and get to that next place. So I'm going to write that down. Am I doing everything I can to live a fulfilling life? And I'm going to add that to the vision board that I made a couple weeks ago. And I'm going to look at that and read that and repeat that as often as I can, or as often as is necessary. And I'm going to do my very best to make sure that that answer is yes. As many times as I ask it, I want that answer to be yes. And I really hope that you find a way to do the same. Find a way that best suits your current lifestyle, your current means, and ask yourself, am I doing everything I can to live a fulfilling life? And hopefully that by asking yourself that often, you can avoid the self-loss experience that I went through. Or if you are currently waking up, for lack of a better term, to a self-loss moment, and you don't know who you are or how you got here or how you've turned into this person, it's going to be okay. It will. Because now that you're aware that all these little teeny tiny decisions have been building up over time, you can do something about it, right? You can address it. You can answer the question, am I doing everything I can to live a fulfilling life? And then just go from there, I had such a hard time letting go, right, of my old self initially. And I wanted so badly to keep that going and make it work, make that career work, make that lifestyle work. But the truth is that just because you've invested in something can't be the only reason that you invest more, you know? Just because you've been in a relationship for X amount of time and it's no longer working or it's no longer serving you should not be the reason that you invest even more time. It's not a waste of time. If you learned something from that, it changed you, it shaped you, it affected you. My 10 years of going after that career, I don't regret it at all. I would do it again. If I graduated college and could make the decision to be recruited by them, I would do it again. Because it was a valuable experience in my life. I learned a lot about myself. I grew a lot. I went through a lot. But I have no regrets over deciding to do that. I'm just glad that I learned that lesson, that just because I had invested so much time into it, that's not a good enough excuse to be the only reason that I invest more. You know, if it's no longer serving you, it's okay for you to walk away. It sucks, it's painful, it's horrifying, like Dr. Sarah says, but it's okay to acknowledge it and walk away and try for something new. Try for something that will actually fulfill you. So, to close out the show, I was working out this week, and while I was writing notes, like my free time when I'm working out is typically when I do my best to try and shut my brain off. I have a really hard time falling asleep. I have a really hard time focusing sometimes if I'm really deep in thought about, especially a project like this that I care so much about. But I was at the gym and I suddenly got struck with, this is the topic we're going to go on. We're going to talk about self-loss. And then I wrote out an outline of what I wanted to say. And then a couple songs later during my workout, this song called Castles by, I believe, Freya Ridings played. And it's a couple years old, so I understand I'm, slow to the times, but Castles came on, and she is essentially, what I believe, she's essentially singing about a breakup and how the person thought that she wouldn't be able to move on without them, and she thought she wouldn't be able to move on without them, but she says that, I'm going to build castles from the rubble of your love. I'm going to be more than you ever thought I was. And I started to think through that as I was writing the outline of self-loss, and started to think to myself, what if she wasn't singing this song to a partner? What if she was singing this song to herself? What if she broke up with herself, her old life, her imaginary person that she was pretending to be for so long, and she finally decided to acknowledge her loss and be okay with the fact that, like, you know what, I'm actually going to start over. I'm actually going to be more. I'm going to start living the way that I was supposed to be living. But essentially, the chorus goes like, and I hate that you're gone, and I hate that I don't want to let you go, and I hate that you think that I'm weak, because I don't want to let you know. I'm going to build castles from the rubble of your love. I'm going to be more than you ever thought I was. And, it kind of goes on, losing your love. It left me stronger. I never noticed. And what if she was singing that to herself? I don't know. I doubt that that's what the artist was actually intending to do, but it just kind of hit me this week when I was listening during my workout. Like, Amanda, what if all that grieving, all that sadness, all that disappointment, all that frustration and hatred and mostly disappointment and guilt that you had for yourself, leaving your job, leaving your career. What if that was you breaking up with your old self? What if that was you saying, I'm going to build castles from the rubble of your life, from the rubble of your career, from the rubble of that mistreatment and inauthenticity. You know, I'm going to be stronger than I ever thought I was. I don't know. It really hit me when I heard that song. So go look it up. Castles, Freya Ridings. I don't know. God bless it. Freya, and then last name Ridings. It's a good song. I never really realized that what if it was a breakup song to herself? You know, your old life, you're shedding that. Who knew? Who knew music could be that powerful and mess you up that bad in the middle of a bench press? But it did. Ooh, shoot. Maybe I do my best thinking when I am actually working out. I don't know. But I hope this helped, or at least I hope it gave you guys or ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, he, she's, they, thems, whoever might be listening, I hope that it gave you at least a definition or a name to what you might be going through. Again, we only scratched the surface in this episode, so I'm going to manifest that maybe one day I can bring Dr. Sarah on the show and we can have more of a deep dive, and I can tell her how much her research and her work so far has, really honestly opened my eyes to so many options for me and opportunities to better understand myself and what I was feeling and dealing with. And that's honestly such a relief. So I hope that by sharing my vulnerability and the research I have so far, it could help you as well. But just remember, ask yourself, am I doing everything I can to live a fulfilling life? And if that answer is yes, then great, keep going. And if that answer is no, then I hope you find the strength and the courage to change that answer from a no to a yes. And if this little podcast can help you get there, then that's really all that matters. And I hope that, if you take anything away from this episode, that's the takeaway. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for, hanging with me on this ride. I really appreciate everyone's feedback so far, and anyone that's reached out to me about the show. I hear you and I see you and I appreciate you. So thank you so much for your continued support. You can always reach out to me. In the show notes, I've got my Instagram and the Podcast for the Lost Instagrams page. So check us out down there. Give us a follow, like, subscribe, rate us, leave a review here on the show. But yeah, 5 stars, share with your friends. If you ever have any questions or you'd like to reach out to me, please send me an email at askwhatnowpodcast@gmail.com. Love hearing from you guys and engaging with you. And you can also, if you're listening on Spotify, you can feel free to leave me a voicemail on the episode. So there's a link in the show notes. But remember, keep your head up. And as always, wanderers are always welcome.